The stars trembled when the Veltar Empire moved through space. Their massive ships looked like giant sea creatures floating through the darkness, with veins of purple light running across their hulls like blood vessels. These were not machines built from metal and circuits. They were alive, breathing, thinking weapons that could change and grow stronger with each battle. For almost 1,000 years, the Veltar had swept across 17 different galaxies. No one could stop them. Their bioships would arrive at a star system, study the defenses for a few hours, then adapt their weapons and shields to counter any resistance. Planets fell in days. Entire civilizations disappeared in weeks. The few survivors would whisper stories of ships that learned how to kill you better each time they attacked. Overlord Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching another galaxy burn. His body was tall and thin, with skin that changed color like a chameleon. 4 arms moved constantly as he directed his forces, and his 6 eyes never blinked as they tracked the destruction below. The last defenders of this galaxy had tried using energy weapons, then kinetic bombardments, then even nuclear strikes. Each time his bioships had adapted within minutes, growing new armor and weapons to counter every tactic. Another galaxy conquered, his lieutenant reported. The native species are extinct. Their technology has been absorbed into our biomatrix. Kethvar nodded with satisfaction. This was how the universe worked. The strong consumed the weak. The adaptable survived while the rigid died. His people had perfected this truth across the cosmos. Meanwhile, in a distant spiral galaxy called the Milky Way, humanity was taking its first real steps into deep space. Captain Dongsu stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, looking out at the stars through the main view screen. The ship was humanity's pride, their first real battleship designed for long-range exploration and defense. It had thick armor plating, powerful engines, and enough weapons to protect Earth's growing colonies. Dongsu was a quiet man in his 40s, with graying hair and steady hands. He had served in Earth's Navy for 20 years before taking command of humanity's first deep space vessel. His crew respected him because he never asked them to do anything he wouldn't do himself. He was fair, smart, and absolutely refused to give up when things got difficult. "Status report," Dongsu said to his bridge crew. "All systems normal, Captain," replied Heijin from the tactical station. She was young but brilliant, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her fingers danced across the weapon controls as she ran another diagnostic. "Weapons are loaded and ready. Shields are at full power." At the engineering station, Tejo looked up from his displays. He was a big man with calloused hands who could fix anything that broke and improve anything that worked. "Engines are running smooth, Captain. I've got the fusion reactors purring like kittens." From communications, So Young reported the latest messages from Earth. She was the youngest member of the senior crew, but her ability to handle complex transmissions and decode alien signals made her invaluable. "No urgent messages from home, sir. Just routine supply schedules and patrol updates." The Defiance was on a routine patrol near the outer edge of human space. Earth's colonies were still small and vulnerable, scattered across a few dozen star systems. The ship's mission was simple: watch for threats, help any ships in distress, and show the flag in humanity's newest territories. What none of them knew was that the Veltar Empire had finally noticed their galaxy. Deep in Veltar space, War Prime Zethlock received orders from Overlord Kethvar himself. Zethlock was a veteran commander who had personally conquered 3 galaxies. His bioship had grown massive over the centuries, fed by the metals and energy absorbed from destroyed worlds. Its hull was nearly black with age, and weapon pods covered its surface like scales on a dragon. "You will take a scouting force to the spiral galaxy designated Sector 7742, Kethvar had commanded. "Intelligence suggests primitive life forms with basic technology. This should be a simple harvest." Zethlock assembled 12 of his finest bioships. Each one was different, having evolved based on the battles they had fought. Some specialized in long-range energy weapons, others in close combat with massive ram prows. All of them could adapt and change their capabilities within hours of encountering new threats. The Veltar fleet entered hyperspace, their bioships swimming through the twisted dimensions like fish through water. They would arrive at the edge of the Milky Way in 3 days, ready to begin another conquest. Back on the Defiance, Captain Dongsu reviewed the latest intelligence reports from Earth. Humanity's deep space sensors had detected some unusual energy signatures near the galactic rim, but nothing that seemed immediately threatening. The patterns didn't match any known natural phenomena, but space was full of mysteries. Could be a pulsar, Taeho suggested when Dongsu showed him the data, or maybe some kind of exotic matter interaction. Keep monitoring it, Dongsu decided. If those readings change, I want to know immediately. Hyejin studied the sensor logs from her tactical console. Something about the patterns bothered her, but she couldn't put her finger on what. The energy signatures seemed almost organized, like they followed some kind of purpose rather than random cosmic events. Captain, she said carefully, I think we should increase our patrol frequency in that sector. These readings, they don't feel natural to me. Dongsu trusted his tactical officer's instincts. Very well. Plot a course that takes us closer to those coordinates. If something's out there, I want to know what it is before it becomes a problem. The Defiance changed course, its engines pushing the ship toward the edge of human space. Behind them, Earth continued its peaceful existence, unaware that the most dangerous predators in the universe were about to arrive at their doorstep. In the depths of hyperspace, Zethlock's bioship sensed the change in their destination's energy patterns. New readings indicated the presence of artificial constructs and organized electromagnetic emissions. The primitive species was more developed than initially estimated, but this only meant a more interesting harvest. Prepare for emergence, Zethlock commanded his fleet. Begin biological adaptation protocols. Analyze all enemy technologies for immediate integration. The 12 bioships began to change, growing new sensor organs and weapon systems based on the energy signatures they detected from the Milky Way. By the time they arrived, they would be perfectly adapted to destroy whatever primitive defenses these new creatures could muster. Neither side knew that they were about to make history. The unstoppable force was about to meet an immovable object, and the universe would never be the same. The Veltar bioships dropped out of hyperspace like nightmares emerging from a bad dream. 12 massive forms materialized at the edge of the Milky Way, their living hulls pulsing with alien light. Each ship was unique, shaped by countless battles and evolutionary adaptations. Some looked like giant squids with weapon tentacles. Others resembled armored whales with energy cannons growing from their backs. War Prime Zethlock stood in the nerve center of his flagship, feeling the ship's biological systems merge with his consciousness. Through the bioship's enhanced senses, he could taste the electromagnetic signatures of this new galaxy, smell the chemical compositions of nearby planets, and hear the radio chatter of the primitive species that lived here. Fascinating, he murmured to his subordinates. These creatures use crude metal vessels powered by controlled fusion reactions. Their communications are unencrypted and broadcast in all directions. They show no awareness of proper stealth protocols. His lieutenant, a young war prime named Veldak, studied the incoming data streams. Their technology appears to be roughly equivalent to pre-stage civilizations we have encountered before. Kinetic weapons, basic energy shields, chemical propulsion systems. Then this will be over quickly, Zethlock decided. Begin standard harvesting procedures. Start with their outer settlements to study their defensive capabilities. Avoid their main population centers until we have adapted to counter all their weapons. The 12 bioships spread out across the galactic rim, their living sensors probing deep into human space. Within hours, they had mapped every human colony, identified the locations of military installations, and cataloged the specifications of humanity's small defensive fleet. Captain Dongsu was reviewing supply reports when So Young's voice cut through the bridge's quiet efficiency. Captain, I'm receiving multiple distress signals from the Kepler colony. Dongsu was at her station in seconds. What's their situation? So Young's fingers flew across her console, trying to filter through the chaos of overlapping emergency transmissions. Sir, they're reporting. This can't be right. They say alien ships are attacking. Multiple vessels, completely unknown design. Alien ships? Hyejin looked up from her tactical display. That's impossible. We haven't detected any non-human technology signatures. The signals are authentic, So Young confirmed. Colony Administrator Kim is personally broadcasting. He says 3 massive ships appeared without warning and began attacking civilian transports. Dongsu felt ice form in his stomach. Humanity's first contact with alien life, and it was an attack on innocent civilians. How long until we reach Kepler colony? Taeho was already calculating. At maximum speed, 14 hours, Captain. Too long, Dongsu said grimly. Push the engines past safety limits. I don't care if we burn out half our systems getting there. Sir, that could damage the ship permanently, Taeho warned. Those are our people out there, Dongsu replied. Make it happen. The Defiance surged forward, its engines glowing white-hot as Taeho fed them more power than they were designed to handle. Warning alarms echoed through the ship as systems strained beyond their limits, but no one complained. They all understood what was at stake. At Kepler Colony, the nightmare was already well underway. 3 Veltar bioships hung in space above the small mining settlement, their weapon tentacles lashing out to destroy anything that moved. Transport ships trying to evacuate civilians were vaporized by beams of coherent energy that dissolved their hulls at the molecular level. Colony Administrator Kim broadcast desperately from the settlement's communications center. This is Kepler Colony to any human ships in range. We are under attack by unknown alien vessels. They appeared without warning and began destroying our transports. We have no military defenses. Please help us! The Veltar ships ignored the colony's surface installations, focusing instead on the fleeing civilian vessels. This was standard procedure. Study the enemy's mobile assets first, then deal with fixed installations once their capabilities were understood. War Prime Veldak commanded the 3 bioships conducting the harvest. Through his flagship's biological senses, he analyzed each human vessel as it was destroyed. The ships used simple titanium steel alloys for armor. Their weapons were primitive kinetic projectiles and basic laser systems. Their engines produced fusion plasma exhaust with predictable energy signatures. These beings show no tactical sophistication, Veldak reported to Zethlock. Their ships flee in straight lines without evasive maneuvers. Their weapons cannot penetrate bioarmor. Their technology poses no threat to our forces. Excellent, Zethlock replied. Continue the harvest. Absorb their materials and prepare for the next phase. But something unexpected happened as the bioships began consuming the wreckage of human vessels. The primitive fusion reactors exploded when the bioships tried to absorb them, causing minor but noticeable damage to their hulls. The simple kinetic weapons, while unable to penetrate bioarmor, created impact stress that interfered with the ship's adaptation processes. For the first time in centuries, Veldak felt a flicker of confusion. Warprime, the enemy technology, is behaving strangely. Their power systems are designed to fail catastrophically when tampered with. Their weapons continue to function even after their ships are destroyed. Curious, Zethlock mused. Perhaps these creatures are more sophisticated than they appear. Continue the analysis. The Defiance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system with its engines on the verge of complete failure. Smoke filled the engineering sections as Taeho's teams fought to keep the ship together, but they had made the journey in 8 hours instead of 14. Report, Dongsu barked as soon as they emerged. Hyejin's sensors swept the system, her face growing pale as the data came in. 3 alien vessels in orbit around Kepler. Massive size, unknown configuration. I'm reading. Debris fields where our transport ships used to be. Survivors? Some escape pods reach the planet's surface, but the aliens aren't pursuing them. They seem focused on destroying ships, not people. Dongsu studied the tactical display, his mind racing. 3 alien ships, each one larger than his battleship. Unknown weapons and defenses. No backup coming for hours. Orders, Captain? Hyejin asked quietly. Every rational thought told Dongsu to retreat, call for reinforcements, and wait for Earth's full fleet to respond. But those were human civilians down there, and every minute he waited meant more people would die. Red alert, he announced to the ship. All hands to battle stations. We're going in. Sir, So Young said from communications. I'm trying to establish contact with the alien vessels. Should I transmit on standard first contact frequencies? Do it, Dongsu ordered. Maybe we can talk our way out of this. So Young broadcast humanity's carefully prepared first contact message, a mathematical sequence designed to show intelligence and peaceful intent. The response came immediately. A focused energy beam that nearly overloaded the Defiance's shields. I guess they're not interested in talking, Taeho observed dryly. Then we'll give them something else to think about, Dongsu said. Hyejin, target the nearest alien ship. All weapons, maximum power. Target locked, Captain. Fire. The Defiance opened fire with everything it had. Plasma cannons, rail guns, missile launchers, and laser batteries. The alien ship's shields flared as the weapons struck home, and for a moment it seemed like the attack had no effect. Then something unexpected happened. The bioship shuddered and began to change. its hull rippling as it tried to adapt to the human weapons. But instead of growing stronger, it seemed confused. Its adaptation processes struggling to counter the chaotic mix of different weapon types. Direct hit, Heejin reported with surprise. We actually damaged their hull. War Prime Veldek stared at his ship's status displays in shock. A primitive vessel had somehow penetrated bioarmor that had resisted the weapons of advanced civilizations. How was this possible? All ships, he commanded, focus fire on the primitive vessel. Destroy it immediately. 3 Veltar bioships turned their weapons on the Defiance, and humanity's first real space battle began. The space around Kepler Colony erupted into chaos as 3 massive bioships concentrated their fire on the lone human battleship. Beams of energy that could melt asteroids lanced through space, while living missiles with gnashing teeth homed in on the Defiance from multiple directions. Captain Dong-Su gripped his command chair as the ship bucked and rolled under the alien assault. Evasive maneuvers. Don't give them an easy target. Heejin's hands flew across her controls, pushing the Defiance through a series of wild turns that would have been impossible for most ships. The battleship twisted and dove like a fighter craft, its hull groaning under forces it was never designed to handle. Captain, Taeho's voice crackled over the comm from engineering. The engines are redlining. We can't keep this up much longer. Hold her together, Dong-Su shouted back. We're all that stands between these things and innocent people. The first alien energy beam had nearly destroyed the Defiance's starboard shield grid. The second missed by meters as Heejin threw the ship into an impossible spiral. The third beam grazed their hull, melting a section of armor that immediately began to cool and crack in the vacuum of space. But something strange was happening to the alien ships. Their weapons, which should have adapted to counter human evasive patterns, seemed confused by the Defiance's erratic movements. Each time they predicted the ship's next position, Heejin would do something completely different. War Prime Veldak watched his targeting systems struggle to lock onto the human vessel. This made no sense. Bioships learned from enemy behavior, adapting their weapons and tactics to counter any pattern, but this primitive ship wasn't following any pattern at all. Analysis, he demanded from his tactical officer. War Prime, the enemy vessel's movements appear to be random. Our adaptation protocols cannot predict random behavior. Each maneuver seems designed specifically to avoid our previous targeting solutions. That's impossible, Veldak snarled. No species fights without tactical doctrine. There must be a pattern we're missing. But there was no pattern to miss. Heejin was flying purely on instinct, making split-second decisions based on gut feeling rather than tactical training. When the aliens fired from the left, she dodged right. When they tried to box her in, she dove straight down. When they expected her to retreat, she charged forward. Their weapons are definitely energy-based, Hyojin reported, as another beam missed them by inches. But they're having trouble tracking us. I think their targeting systems are designed to predict logical movement patterns. Then stay illogical, Dong-Su ordered. Taeho, what's our weapon status? All systems operational, but we're burning through ammunition fast. Those railgun rounds don't grow on trees. Make every shot count. Hyojin, I need you to get us close enough for a full broadside. Close enough? Captain, those things are massive. Getting close to them would be suicide. Maybe. But it might also be the last thing they expect. Heejin looked at her captain for a moment, then smiled grimly. Understood, sir. Beginning suicide run. The Defiant suddenly changed direction, abandoning its evasive pattern to charge straight at the nearest bioship. The alien vessel, caught off guard by this apparent death wish, tried to bring its weapons to bear. But the human ship was moving too fast and too erratically. Veldak watched in disbelief as the primitive vessel closed to point-blank range. What are they doing? This makes no tactical sense. Maybe they're trying to ram us? His tactical officer suggested uncertainly. Impossible. Their ship would be destroyed on impact. No rational commander would sacrifice their vessel for so little gain. But Dong-Su wasn't thinking about rational tactics. He was thinking about the civilians on Kepler Colony, about the transport ships that had been destroyed, about the fact that his ship was humanity's only hope. Now, he shouted. The Defiance unleashed everything it had at point-blank range. Plasma cannons fired continuous streams of superheated gas. Railguns launched depleted uranium slugs at significant fractions of light speed. Missile launchers emptied their magazines in a matter of seconds. Laser batteries carved glowing lines across the bioship's hull. The alien vessel shuddered under the assault, its bioarmor trying desperately to adapt to the sudden barrage. But the weapons were too diverse, too chaotic, fired too quickly for the ship's biological systems to counter them all. Direct hits across their forward section, Hee-Jin reported with excitement. We're penetrating their armor. The bioship's hull began to bleed a luminescent fluid that sparkled in space like liquid starlight. Weapon pods along its surface withered and died as the human weapons found their mark. For the first time in its centuries of existence, the living vessel experienced real pain. But the Defiance paid a price for its success. The bioship's return fire at close range overwhelmed the human shields entirely, melting large sections of the battleship's hull. Atmosphere vented from dozens of breaches as emergency bulkheads slammed shut. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7, damage control reported. We've lost main power to sections C and D. Keep firing! Dong-Su ordered, even as his ship died around him. The other 2 bioships closed in, their weapons charging for killing shots. But something unexpected happened. Instead of retreating or surrendering, the damaged human ship did something that broke every rule of space combat. Ramming speed, Dong-Su shouted. Sir? Hee-Jin stared at him in shock. You heard me. Full speed ahead. If we're going down, we're taking one of them with us. The Defiance, trailing atmosphere and burning debris, accelerated directly toward the wounded bioship. Its engines, already damaged beyond repair, howled in protest as Taeho fed them every erg of power the ship could generate. Veldak watched in horror as the primitive vessel prepared to ram his flagship. This was madness. No civilized species would sacrifice a capital ship for such a desperate attack. Evasive maneuvers, he commanded. But bioships were not designed for quick turns. They were massive, powerful, and evolved for overwhelming firepower rather than agility. The damaged vessel tried to move, but its injuries had crippled several maneuvering organs. At the last second, Hee-Jin pulled the Defiance into a sharp turn that scraped along the bioship's hull like a knife along bone. The human ship's remaining weapons fired at point-blank range, carving deep wounds in the alien vessel's side. Chunks of bioarmor and internal organs spilled into space as the Defiance tore past. The ramming run didn't destroy the bioship, but it crippled it. The massive alien vessel listed to one side, its weapon systems dark, its bioluminescent veins flickering like a dying heartbeat. One down, Dong-Su said grimly. 2 to go. But the Defiance was in no condition to continue fighting. Half its weapons were offline, its shields were gone, and atmosphere was still leaking from a dozen hull breaches. By all rights, the battle should have been over. Instead, something happened that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The human ship, battered and dying, turned to face the 2 remaining bioships and opened fire again. They're still fighting, Veldak whispered in amazement. Their ship is destroyed, but they're still fighting. His tactical officer was staring at the sensor readings with wide eyes. Warprime, our adaptation algorithms are failing. We cannot predict their behavior because it has no logical basis. They fight like they don't care if they die. For the first time in his long career, Warprime Veldak felt something he had never experienced before. Doubt. These primitives were supposed to be easy prey, another simple harvest to feed the Empire's growth. Instead, they had damaged a bioship with inferior weapons and were continuing to fight against impossible odds. What kind of species fought like this? What kind of madness drove them to prefer death over surrender? The answers to those questions would change everything the Veltar thought they knew about the universe. But first, they would have to survive the encounter with humanity's stubborn refusal to give up. The battle for Kepler Colony was far from over. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler Colony, Overlord Kethvar stood in the neural core of his flagship, studying the reports from Warprime Zethlock with growing disbelief. The bioscreens around him pulsed with tactical data, DNA analysis, and psychological profiles of the new species that had somehow defeated Veltar bioships. Explain to me again, Kethvar said, his voice carrying the deadly calm that preceded violent punishment. How a single primitive vessel destroyed 2 of our bioships and forced an entire squadron to retreat. Zethlock maintained his composure despite the obvious danger. Overlord, these humans do not fight according to any known tactical doctrine. Their behavior is completely unpredictable. Our adaptation systems cannot counter random actions driven by emotion rather than logic. Emotion, Kethavar's six eyes focused on his subordinate with laser intensity. You retreat from creatures that fight with feelings. With respect, Overlord, you were not there. I have commanded bioships for 8 centuries. I have conquered civilizations that had millions of years to perfect their warfare. But these humans, Zethlock paused, searching for words. They fight like they would rather die than lose. Not because of tactical calculation, but because of something deeper, something our bioships cannot understand or counter. Kethavar absorbed this information, his biomechanical mind processing the implications. For 1,000 years, the Veltar Empire had grown by adapting to and overcoming every form of resistance they encountered. Their bioships learned, evolved, and perfected themselves with each battle. But adaptation required patterns to learn from, and patterns required logic. "Show me the battle recordings again," he commanded. The bio screens came alive with images from the Kepler engagement. Kethavar watched the human ship's erratic movements, its suicidal charges, its refusal to surrender even when facing certain destruction. He saw bioships that should have adapted within minutes struggling to counter tactics that made no sense. "They damaged our ships with primitive kinetic weapons," Kethavar observed. "Yes, Overlord. Our bio-armor had never encountered such chaotic weapon combinations fired at random intervals. The adaptation protocols could not establish defensive patterns, and when their ship was crippled, instead of surrendering, they attempted ramming attacks." "Correct. No rational species would sacrifice a capital ship for such limited tactical gain." Kethavar studied the final moments of the battle. Watching the damaged human vessel drift toward the planet, it was protecting even as its systems failed. This level of devotion was unprecedented in his experience. "Prepare the primary fleet," he decided. "I will deal with these humans personally. Overlord, perhaps we should study them further before—" "No." Kethavar's voice cut through the suggestion like a blade. "The Empire has never retreated from primitives. If these humans fight with emotion, then we will adapt to emotion. If they prefer death to surrender, then we will give them death. But we will not be defeated by creatures who barely understand space travel." The order went out across Veltar space, and the Empire's war machine began to move. Bioships that had conquered galaxies were recalled from distant sectors. Entire fleets that had been harvesting resources from dead civilizations turned toward the Milky Way. Within weeks, the largest Veltar armada in history was assembling for the journey to human space. Meanwhile, Earth's governments were struggling to comprehend what had happened at Kepler Colony. The recordings from the Defiance had been studied by every military analyst on the planet, but the implications were almost too large to process. Admiral Park, the head of Earth's Space Defense Force, stood before the Global Security Council with grim determination. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are at war with an alien empire that has conquered 17 galaxies. The Kepler engagement was not a victory, it was a warning. But our ships defeated them," the representative from the European Union pointed out. Captain Dongsu proved that human tactics can overcome their technology. Captain Dongsu proved that desperate courage and impossible odds can sometimes produce miracles, Admiral Park corrected. But miracles are not a sustainable military strategy. The aliens retreated to regroup, not because we defeated them, but because we surprised them. That won't happen again. The recordings from Kepler had shown humanity something about themselves that they had never fully understood. When faced with an overwhelming enemy, humans didn't calculate odds or surrender when the mathematics became unfavorable. They fought harder. They took risks that defied logic. They would rather die standing than live kneeling. "What are our options?" asked the representative from the Pacific Alliance. "We have perhaps 6 months before they return in force," Admiral Park replied. "We can evacuate our outer colonies and fall back to Earth's defenses, or we can meet them head-on and try to repeat what happened at Kepler. 6 months to prepare for an empire that's conquered 17 galaxies," the African Federation's representative said quietly. "Those are not encouraging odds, but humanity had never been discouraged by bad odds." Across Earth's colonies, emergency shipyards worked around the clock to build new vessels. The Defiance had shown that human ships could damage alien bioships, but they needed more ships, better weapons, and tactics that took advantage of humanity's unique approach to warfare. Captain Dongsu found himself at the center of Earth's desperate preparations. His experience at Kepler made him the closest thing humanity had to an expert on fighting Veltar bioships. He worked with engineers to analyze the wreckage recovered from the battle with tacticians to develop new combat doctrines, and with captains to train them in the art of unpredictable warfare. The key, he explained to a group of newly promoted captains, is to never do what they expect. These bioships learn from patterns, so don't give them patterns to learn from. Change your tactics constantly. Take risks that no sane commander would take. Fight like your life depends on it, because it does. Captain Hyunwoo of the Indomitable raised his hand. Sir, how do we train our people to be unpredictable? Military doctrine is based on proven tactics and coordinated strategies. Forget doctrine, Dongsu replied. Doctrine is predictable. Instead, trust your instincts. Trust your crew. When everything looks hopeless, that's when you charge. When retreat makes sense, that's when you attack. The aliens understand logic, they don't understand human stubbornness. Captain Mirai of the Relentless spoke up. What about when we're outnumbered? The report suggests they could bring hundreds of ships. Then we make sure that every ship they lose costs them more than they can afford. Dongsu said grimly. We might not be able to win a conventional war against them, but we can make victory so expensive that they decide to look for easier prey. As Earth's preparations intensified, deep space sensors began detecting the approach of massive energy signatures moving toward the Milky Way. The aliens were returning, and they were bringing everything they had. Overlord Kethavar's armada was indeed massive, 400 bioships of every size and configuration, representing the accumulated might of 17 conquered galaxies. Some were ancient vessels that had fought in the first Veltar expansion, their hulls scarred by countless battles. Others were newly grown, incorporating the latest biological adaptations and weapon systems. At the center of the fleet, Kethavar's flagship was a living mountain of biomechanical horror. The ship had grown to massive size over the centuries, fed by the resources of dead worlds and enhanced with the technologies of extinct civilizations. Its weapon pods could sterilize planets, its shields could deflect stellar radiation, and its biocomputational systems could outthink the greatest military minds in the galaxy. Emergence in the primitive system in 12 hours, his navigator reported. Excellent, Kethavar replied. Signal all ships to begin final adaptation protocols. I want every bioship perfectly configured to counter human tactics before we arrive. But as the Veltar fleet prepared for emergence, something unexpected was happening in human space. Instead of cowering behind Earth's defenses, humanity had chosen to meet the invasion head-on. Every ship Earth could muster was moving to intercept the alien fleet at the edge of the solar system. It was a desperate gamble, but it was also the most human response possible. When faced with impossible odds, they didn't hide. They attacked. The stage was set for a battle that would determine the fate of both species. The unstoppable force that had conquered galaxies was about to meet the immovable object of human determination. Neither side realized that this battle would change the fundamental nature of warfare in the galaxy forever. War Prime Zethlock watched the battle unfold through his bioship's enhanced senses, and what he saw made his forearms tremble with confusion. For 800 years he had commanded Veltar forces across 17 galaxies. He had seen every possible form of space combat, witnessed the fall of countless civilizations, and absorbed the technologies of 1,000 different species. But this made no sense. The primitive human vessel should have been destroyed within minutes. Its technology was crude, its firepower limited, its defenses laughable compared to bioship capabilities. Yet somehow, impossibly, it had crippled one of his best ships and was still fighting against odds that should have crushed any rational opponent. Report. From Veldek's squadron, his communications officer announced. Put it through, Zethlock commanded. Veldek's image appeared on the bioscreen, his usually composed features twisted with frustration. War Prime, we require immediate assistance. The primitive vessel has damaged my flagship and continues to resist our forces despite taking critical damage. How is this possible? Zethlock demanded. Your bioships should have adapted to counter their weapons within minutes. That's the problem, sir. We cannot adapt to their tactics because they have no tactics. They fight without logic, without pattern, without any regard for their own survival. Our systems are designed to counter rational opponents, not whatever this is. Zethlock studied the tactical data streaming from the battle. The human ship's movements were indeed chaotic, almost random. Each maneuver seemed designed specifically to confuse rather than achieve any strategic advantage. When cornered, Instead of surrendering or retreating, they attacked. When damaged, instead of seeking repairs, they pressed forward. When faced with certain destruction, they attempted ramming attacks that no sane commander would consider. This behavior violates every principle of warfare, Zethlock muttered. No species fights like this. But even as he watched, the impossible became more impossible. The human ship, its hull-bleeding atmosphere and trailing debris, managed to score another hit on Veldak's second escort vessel. The bioship reeled as kinetic rounds punched through armor that should have adapted to stop them. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Dong-Su assessed their desperate situation. Half the ship's systems were offline. They were down to emergency power, and the hull was holding together more through stubbornness than structural integrity. But somehow they were still in the fight. Ammunition report, he called to Heejin. Railgun magazines at 30%. Plasma cannon capacitors are fluctuating. Missile launchers are empty. She paused, checking another readout. Sir, we have 1 torpedo left. 1 torpedo against 2 massive alien ships. Taeho's voice crackled over the comm. I like those odds. You're insane, you know that? So Young said from her communications station. But she was smiling as she said it. Probably. Dong-Su agreed. But we're not dead yet, and neither are the people on Kepler Colony. Heejin, can you get us close enough for a torpedo run? Those ships are learning our patterns, Captain. Each attack gets harder. Then we don't use patterns. We make it up as we go. Heejin studied her tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. The alien ships were clearly trying to predict their movements, adapting their weapons and tactics based on previous encounters. But what if she did something that made no tactical sense at all? Captain, I have an idea. It's completely crazy. The best ideas usually are. What if we shut down our engines and drift toward them? Let them think we're dead? Taeho's voice erupted from the speakers. Are you both insane? If we shut down the engines now, we might not get them started again. That's what makes it perfect, Heejin explained. They're expecting us to keep fighting. They won't expect us to play dead. Do it. Dong-Su decided. The Defiance's engine suddenly went dark. The ship continued forward on momentum alone, tumbling slowly as if it had lost all power. Emergency lights flickered along its hull, making it look like a dying animal. Veldak watched the human vessel's energy signature fade to almost nothing. Finally! Their power systems have failed. Move in to finish them. His 2 remaining bioships approached the drifting human ship cautiously, their weapons charging for the killing blow. They had learned to respect this primitive vessel's unpredictability. But a dead ship was a dead ship. They came closer. Close enough to see the battle damage scoring the human hull. Close enough to detect the faint heat signatures of dying systems. Close enough to be surprised when the dead ship suddenly roared back to life. Now, Dong-Su shouted. The Defiance's engines blazed with emergency power as Taeho dumped everything the ship had left into the reactor. The battleship spun around with impossible speed and launched its last torpedo at point-blank range. The bioship tried to adapt, growing new defensive systems to counter the incoming weapon. But the torpedo was too close, moving too fast. It punched through the alien hull and detonated deep inside the living vessel. The bioship convulsed as the explosion tore through its internal organs. Bioluminescent fluid fountained from the wound as the creature died in space, its massive body going dark and cold. 2 down. Hyejin reported with grim satisfaction. But their victory came at a cost. The engine overload had finally pushed the Defiance beyond its limits. Warning klaxons blared as power systems failed throughout the ship. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the bridge as backup systems struggled to keep them alive. That's it, Taeho announced over the comm. We're running on battery power now. Engines are completely dead. Life support will last maybe an hour. The last bioship hung in space, studying the human vessel with new respect. Veldak had lost 2 ships to this primitive opponent, and he was beginning to understand why. These humans didn't fight to win. They fought to make sure their enemy lost, even if it meant dying in the process. War Prime, his tactical officer, reported, the human vessel appears to be dead in space. All major systems have failed. Excellent. Move in and finish them. But as the bioship approached, Veldak noticed something that made his blood run cold. The human ship was drifting toward the planet, toward the colony they had been trying to protect. Even powerless and dying, it was still trying to complete its mission. These creatures are insane, he whispered. the bioship's weapons charged, preparing to end the battle once and for all. But before it could fire, new contacts appeared on the sensors. 3 more human ships had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. So Young looked up from her communications console with the first smile she'd worn since the battle began. "Captain, I'm receiving transmissions from the UES Indomitable, UES Relentless, and UES Determined. Captain Hyunwoo is requesting our status." "Tell him we're still here," Dong-Su said wearily. "Damaged but operational. Should I mention that we can't move, can't fight, and are running on battery power?" No need to worry them with details. War Prime Zethlock watched the new human ships enter the battle zone and made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Instead of reinforcing Veldak with more bioships, he ordered a general retreat. But War Prime, his communications officer, protested. "We can still overwhelm them with superior numbers." "No," Zethlock said quietly. "We cannot. These humans have shown us something we never encountered before, an enemy that cannot be adapted to because they refuse to follow any logical pattern. They would rather die than surrender, rather sacrifice everything than give up." He stared at the tactical display, watching as the human reinforcements took defensive positions around their crippled comrade. "Signal the fleet. We withdraw to regroup and analyze this new threat. Sir, the Empire will not understand retreat from primitive opponents. The Empire has never faced opponents like these." Zethlock replied. "These humans fight with their hearts instead of their minds. Our bioships cannot adapt to pure emotion." As the remaining Veltar ships disappeared into hyperspace, Captain Dong-Su allowed himself a moment of relief. They had done the impossible, stopped an alien invasion with a single ship and pure human stubbornness. But he knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, an entire empire was learning about humanity's existence, and next time they would come prepared. The question was, would humanity be ready for them?